Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Procurement Trends 2025. I'm very pleased to have my dear friends James and Karthik with me today. And before we're going to start, I would just briefly introduce James and Karthik. James is a really cool guy. We know each other for a couple of years now. He's a kind of a digital nomad living, let's say, in different parts of the world, spending a lot of his time in Bulgaria, in Bansko, but also spending a lot of time right now in Argentina, and it's Paraguay right now. That's right. And really cool to have you here, James. And of course, besides doing the great consulting work, helping a lot of companies on the procurement tech side, he's running procurementsoftware.site. And that's really cool. If you have any questions about what software to use, James is the guy to go to. On the other hand, there is Karthik Rama, a very well-known procurement doctor, also living, let's say, in different parts of the world, covering basically, especially the Middle East, with Dubai and UAE, and also being very present with his company, and also today in India. So, Karthik, really pleased to have you in this Procurement Trends as well. Thank you very much for joining.
It's a pleasure.
Really cool. So how do we start? So I think 25 will be a year with a lot of different challenges, where it's absolutely reasonable to look into. But before we go to 25, let's have a brief look into 24. So there was a couple of things, of course, in 24 that changed a lot. Of course, today Trump was just inaugurated and he was elected. So even though in 24 things have been changing a lot, also in the procurement world, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on how you think, let's say, 24 went and what was the direction we have been heading into. So very curious if one of you can maybe share his thoughts on this.
Yeah, I can go if you want, Andreas, just briefly before we go into what we're looking at for 25. So I think 2024 was certainly dominated by the intake and process orchestration space. I think there's a growing acknowledgement now that even if you have one of the more established, mature suite products, it doesn't do absolutely everything that you may need it to, especially if you're a large enterprise procurement organization. And just a lot of the tech that's coming out now is way more nimble and faster to implement and has a much better UI UX than some of the more mature products that have been out there. And I think that trend will continue. Obviously, going into 2025, we're going to talk more about that going forward. The other thing that I saw was, there was a lot of talk about funding drying up, and it certainly got harder from what I hear. The VCs are not throwing money around like confetti like they were in 2020 and 2021. But if you have a good concept and a strong business plan that will, they're not looking for the next Facebook or next unicorn now. They're just looking for something that will give them a good rate of return. So they want to see a clear path to profitability. And there's still plenty of money around for seed funding, from what I can tell. Series A, Series B certainly, and the later rounds are getting trickier. But if you're an early stage startup, it's harder than it was 3 years ago, but it's not impossible, is what I'm hearing.
Karthik, what do you think?
Yeah. So 2024 has been a roller coaster ride, to be honest. And I agree with what James is saying, right? It was process orchestration. There were a few things that was started off as a trend, and a bit of it also reflected a bit of what's coming in for the future, right? We were asking for one unified front end for our end users or people to make it much more easier from a user experience standpoint, which is the process orchestration layer. Now, at the same time, you're talking about a little bit on the future of how do we automate certain tasks in each of the areas. And I think procurement, regardless, whichever year you go, you have a bit of everything. It's not like the whole of procurement is in one particular, what do you say, level or one particular maturity. But there's a lot of nice futuristic tech that's out there. I don't know whether enough people know about it. So that's the other piece. Or I don't know whether people are even still shooting for the stars. There are a lot of people still fighting with the basics as well. So I've did a little bit of that in 2024 in terms of my consulting piece, where I was trying to help people with the basics. A few guys where we helped them with something very advanced like a RPA or something else. But we went when we tried that, we knew that they still the basics are not right. So they had to go back and redo the basics in terms of the data process of people kind of thing. So that's what has been 2024 for me. But all around, it seems to be the beginning of the new era or beginning of a new future, 2024.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely agree. I think, let's say, basically everything what especially ChatGPT brought into the game was a game changer in many ways. And of course, this really happened in 24 a lot. And especially what you have been talking about, let's say things like orchestration and intake have been changing also, where AI was very, very helpful to contribute in and having a very good user experience. So I just want to add one more topic, which was very surprisingly for me. So that it was so different in 24 than in 23, and that was about sustainability. So when you have been looking around at DPW, for example, and the year before, everything was basically about sustainability in a certain way. And so in 22, it was even more, and it was everywhere and all around. And this has really been dramatically reduced from my perspective, at least from my perspective, in 24. This was really very different. So there is, of course, also a certain in the field. It feels to me a bit like there is a, yeah, let's say that the market is settling itself in a certain way. So in 24, some really startups have been going through the roof, being very successful, getting an amazing funding. Others have been taken off the market. So there have been pretty much a consolidation happening also in 24. So this is just my perspective, especially looking at the European perspective. How do you see this?
So I'll chime in here to begin with. So I'll tell you what. Um, I think it's a yearly cycle or a 2 year, once in 2 year cycle, right? It's a yearly cycle where there's a new trend, the new shiny object, whether it's a sales play or a marketing play, where everybody turns that way, and then it's a new sales pitch, a new set of features. Unfortunately, it's been the case for the last couple of years, whether it's ESG or whether if it's process orchestration. It happened a couple of times since the last couple of years. So honestly, I feel like no tech is built deep enough in a particular feature set or a particular functionality. So that's part of the problem, and that's where it's very important for the procure tech to also have a strong vision, mission statement, which would guide them, have a guiding principle over the years. Although it could tweak a little bit here and there, but don't blindly follow what something that's not in your ballpark, right? Something that's somewhere close by, pull it in. I hope the current trend of whether it is orchestration, agentic bots, or whatever lasts for more than 2 years for it to actually mature. Else will again fall flat. So that I don't want that to happen for another trend to come in and replace it. So that's my 2 cents on that, Andreas.
Mhm. James, you're muted, James, as it looks like, so I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, there was a bit of background noise, so I muted myself. Yeah, I would add to that, and I agree with you, Karthik. I would add to that I think, obviously, what's happened in the US with the election, that means there's been an ideological shift. So that means, American companies will probably not have it as high on their agenda. But, there's still legislation in Europe. And if you want to do business in places like Germany and Norway that have these supply chain transparency laws, then companies are still going to have to address it. So I certainly don't think the topic's going away. It's perhaps a little bit lower down on the CEO's agenda, especially for US domiciled corporations. I think that's a fair assessment. The other thing is, I just don't see this being led entirely by procurement, and I'll contextualize that a little bit more. I think scope 3 definitely sits within procurement, because that's 100% looking at the supply chain and who manages vendors. Essentially, it's procurement, and who's responsible for making sure that those vendors are compliant. It's procurement. I think a wider sustainability strategy and corporate social responsibility and wider ESG initiatives, I just don't think that will sit within procurement. A, because we don't have the resources, and B, just because, this, Andreas, as a startup founder trying to sell software, we just don't have the influence within the wider business to be able to lead and implement that. So I think scope 3 will sit within procurement. If I was the founder of a carbon emissions tracking software, I would be pretty confident to continue selling that to procurement and exhibiting at procurement conferences. But if I was a wider ESG platform, perhaps procurement wouldn't be top of my list as the potential department or area that I wanted to sell and market to principally.
Cool, thank you. I think, of course, today, and of course, especially yesterday, have been very special days for the whole world by all the stuff that has been signed by Mr. Donald Trump already yesterday. And things are moving quite fast right now. We already have been touching that point. So things are shifting a bit. So looking a bit into 25, especially with this big change that's happening even yesterday. So what do you expect what the procurement will look like in 25? What will be the priorities from your perspective? What will be different to 24?
James, why don't you take a stab and then I'll come back.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there are a few. I mean, I did a podcast episode on this just before Christmas, so I used ChatGPT to just summarize that, so as I've got it in front of me, I don't forget. So the first one I think will be, and this is, you don't really need to have a crystal ball to see this coming, I think will be the growing use of agentic AI and co-pilots. So AI is getting to the point now that it can almost perform better than a sort of fairly junior level administrative assistant in a lot of cases. So, they just don't. They're just going to make fewer mistakes. They're not going to need time off. They're not going to have any HR issues. All the types of disadvantages that you get with employees. So, I think that's going to be the answer to the age-old procurement leader challenge of I don't have enough people to perform the workload that I need to perform. The second one, I think, will be the rise of niche category-specific or industry-specific or geography-focused solutions. I had a gentleman on my podcast back in November who was the CCO of a source-to-pay platform that just focused on the energy sector, essentially the oil and gas sector in the US and Canada and the Middle East. And that's just one example. When you look at some of the big industry sectors or geographical markets that are very much underserved, I always say, if I had some VC money, I would go out and buy and build a source to pay or source to contract platform that served the Brazilian market, for example, because you've got 200 million people there and no real native procure tech operating in that market. I think process and orchestration will continue to show growth, but I think it may sort of hit a ceiling. And what do I mean by that? I mean by that the mid-market is greenfield, but enterprise typically will already have some sort of tech stack in place. So I don't see it necessarily replacing the existing tech stack in enterprise, whereas I could see it being an alternative to one of the more traditional suites in a mid-market business or in a growth tech sector business, for example. Then the other two, where I see more.
If you're okay with that, James, maybe you can, before we go through all the 5 or 6 or how much you have, maybe we can start going a bit more into the deep dive of these
sure.
two for now, because I think it's very interesting. Let's say also to especially also hear Karthik's let's say perspective, and especially about the different markets, because as I said, because I pretty much have an eye on the European market. But I think maybe it would be very interesting starting with the second point that you just raised, James. So if Karthik just sees this the same way, so is there also the need of these more local solutions, especially looking at the Middle East and also looking into India? Is there also a big gap in terms of localization of what software can do?
So I think it's a mix of somewhat both, because most of the software solutions that are out there can cater to maybe 60-70% of whatever you do today. That goes across any geography or any what do you say, niche categories or whatever you may say. Now it's up to you as an organization whether you're happy with that much, or you want it to be 100%, make it more effective or more user friendly, or you want people to actually be happy. So if you want people to actually be happy, then you could go with these niche solutions like what James was suggesting, someone who's specifically catered to the energy sector, right? And these guys do really well. But again, the flip side to that is you may or may not have the same amount of maybe the way it looks, or the features would be there, the functionality would be there, but you need to be ready to adapt to what the tool is giving you as a solution. And I think there's a definite play in there. If you remember, at least like 4 or 5 years ago, we kept talking about best of breeds, hybrid, all this. We've been always talking about it, but it's always been in a lingo, and with agentic bots or AI or whatever you have, I don't know whether the niche bit could be managed by the bot. That was the other question that was coming to my mind. I've spoken to a few industry thought leaders within the region as well, who are very strong on their procure tech side. And there's this big question like, the old fashion comes back. We had bell bottom back in the 70s in terms of your bottoms. And now they've come back in 2000s to boot cuts, right? Similarly, on the tech space, we had our own internet page for our suppliers to get onboarded way back then, right? When we started, where some supplier come clicks and onboards. Now there are people saying that do we need to go to a complete provider? Maybe we could just have this one small solution, agents that are doing the front end work, and we'll manage whatever way with the in-house. So I see in the recent past the make versus buy debate also out there, because people don't know much, and it's not a mature state that we are at right now, even from the agentic bot standpoint as well. And the use cases are not proven. We don't have all the use cases jotted down black and white. So that's the blurredness that I'm seeing right now where people are, and particularly in the region as well. So that's another few of the big guys who've been using tech for a while. They're trying to go this route, but they don't know whether they should do it in-house with their heavy-handed IT team, or source it out to someone who's been doing it for a while, or go with my supplier, someone else who has the agentic architecture. So things that's the big question mark for people. So they need a guidance to show them the path, whether it's this or that, which the pros and cons of both the ways.
Yeah, I think pretty much that there is in many cases a lot of need to have a good adaptability of your software, and that's not just okay. We produce the standard software, or we do customer individualized software. I think there's a way in between where you can just make a lot of adaptability features that you can plug in, plug off, for example, as you just have been talking about Brazil, for example. So in Brazil, of course, taxes work differently. So every region has different taxes, and it needs to be calculated completely differently. That's, for example, a topic that you need to deal with. In the UAE, you need to deal with ICV rules, let's say, that are especially important for dealing with different different legislations about who is getting what and what is the perspective legal necessities I need to capture. The same in Germany. Of course, it's very hard to get it all. So of course, also for the German market, let's say public procurement also has a lot of different specialities. Yeah, but I pretty much think adaptability will be key. And I think also in the topic I would go into a bit right now is when we're talking about AI, when we're talking about agents, I think this adaptability is becoming more easy to get. That this is just not all right, either standard software or the customer gets it all for just himself. I think there is a way better chance right now if you use agents. And I think personally that's my big topic for 25. What I see also as my priority number one, what I think will change a lot. Because especially agents have been becoming better and better, and we have, especially in the area of intake, we have been seeing, let's say, first agents coming in, taking right now over. And it's, of course, there's a good reason where it's in many media that right now we're talking not about one agent, we're talking about multi-agent systems that will arise. And if you're pretty much capable of dealing also with the hallucinations that, let's say, that an AI will come up with, because it's happening, yeah, and we need to deal with and find safety nets for making this work, I think this can be a very great added value. And not just only for B2C, like, for example, you want to book a trip to whatever, wherever, and then the bot basically completely helps you on the complete journey from your planning it until you basically safely arrive at home, and he can guide you through the complete journey. And this is the only interface you're talking to, and basically he's helping you all the way. And that's pretty much becoming reality right now. I was just trying to plan a trip for myself. It didn't work out that much for now, so I was playing around with this. But I think this is the same principle. It's coming up now. The possibilities are there. And I think pretty much this is the same for procurement, where I also expect just the same, so that especially many tasks can be really handled by an agent. So a person you're talking to, and the person you can either, let's say, even use voice, or you can use a chat, but you're having the full interaction with this agent for making basically your procurement dreams come true. And that's basically what I pretty much also expect for 25, and we're also pretty much working on it, because that's a mega cool possibility also for startups, delivering really very good user experience and having not the necessity like jumping from one window to the next, and I need to fill out this here, that's not relevant for me. And I think this can be pretty much become very much the past when you do it right. So this is basically my perspective, and I'm of course seeing a lot of possibilities around these agents also happening, especially also, of course, also for my supply. What is your perspective on this?
I think, Andreas, I mean, you're obviously closer to the coalface from a tech perspective in terms of what you're developing with your own tool. But I think what you're doing at My Supply is a great example, actually. I mean, you're, compared to some of the big boys, you're still a relatively small company. And 2 years ago, it would have just been completely prohibitive from a cost perspective for you to even undertake that kind of thing. So I think it's credit to how far the technology has come and how much it's come down in price. And I can say this because I know your pricing is very transparent on your website. It's pretty affordable to go out and buy it from you now, isn't it? I mean, I'm not trying to shill your solution, but I mean, I think what you're charging for that is very, very reasonable and is well within reach of, the average mid-sized business. You don't have to be a DAX 40 or FTSE 5, a FTSE 100 corporation to be able to go out and buy this tech now. I also think the whole make versus buy debate, and I agree that it is sort of starting to come back on the table. and I understand why it is, in terms of how much more accessible the tech is and how much it's come down in price. But you've got to be pretty confident in your ability as an IT function or a procurement center of excellence team to be able to go head to head with all of the venture capital money that's in procurement tech these days. If you're someone that's got pretty A-player department of digital procurement experts, someone like a Maersk or a Vodafone or a Roche, go ahead. But if your maturity curve is pretty low and you're still using one of the legacy suites with no other tech and no digital procurement experts, I think it would be a very foolish choice to try and build or manage an IT project of that size.
Yeah, so maybe just adding to this, what you just said, I think, let's say the connectivity between different systems can be pretty much also increased using these agents. So if, let's say, you have a pretty much better possibilities also connect one agent to another. So this means, for example, if there is a software out there taking care with agents also for the belongings, it's easier to plug in other agents. For example, if you're having an intake management tool already in place and you want to do something on top of that, you can plug in an agent which takes a certain role in this. Or let's say taking care for, let's say, adding further data on sustainability or whatever it takes. I think the connectivity with agents is just getting very much improved because you don't have so much of an effort to do all these difficult integrations as it was in the past. And I think this is also a big change, the ability to have these multi-agent networks, which can come from different parties as well. And I think that's a very huge one from my perspective. And this will change a lot. And we will see much more connectivity. Also, just talking about SAP, for example, SAP is just opening up the landscape in terms of opening to providers step by step, also to use their speech assistant Joule, where this is opening up. And this is also a possibility, let's say, in that landscape to connect. And then that's, I think, a very cool way of, let's say, getting your whole procurement environment to the next level without having to switch from one window to the next and the other one, because nobody wants that. Everybody just wants to use one tool. That's it, and get everything in this one tool. And I think that will be pretty much a big change, not just only in 25, but most likely starting in 25, I think.
Yeah, and we must not forget the human element as well, which is
Yes.
all this will work only if the human element works. If you are
Yes.
able to deliver the right amount of knowledge or the the emotional quotient element or whatever may be the case, tying back for those bots to actually help you do better. Without that, we cannot do all of this. And also be open, like the adoption piece again. It's a very basic thing. So that adopting it and utilizing it and interacting with it, the more you do it, the better it gets. And similar to the niche tech that we're talking about, the future would be niche bots as well, who have access to, let's say, similar example like the energy or whatever space, right? It's a little different. So you have bots which will gather that intellect, and it'll talk much better language in terms of when it comes to a particular category or industry or region, the cultural sensitivity and all that stuff in the future. So it's going to be a much more awesome time to be in the future.
Mm-hmm. How do you think this will be different also in different regions? So, of course, the acceptance, as you said, is of course, a difficult point here. So I think, of course, everybody knows that, especially looking into the Chinese market, it's when it comes, for example, to a negotiation. Yeah. So it's pretty much, okay, everybody needs to sit together, have a couple of times the dinner together before doing some connecting and so on. Of course, cultures are very different, and the openness of doing things with a with also chatbots is arising also more from the private sector than from B2B, from my perspective. But we are most likely in many areas are getting used to it, especially also in Germany. And of course, the bots are getting better, and I think the acceptance rate is also raising. How do you see this? How will this be different in other parts of the world?
So one primary thing is the regulatory stuff. Those kind of stuff would be taken care of. It's not a aspects of, or whether it is or the ship to location, all those kind of the minutiae, they'll be taken care of by the bot, right? You don't need to worry about all that. The bot is going to do it a much better job of at it. The translation, the language translation, or whatever, if there's something related around that, and maybe to make it more personalized or whatever may be the case. How do you interact with someone from a particular region or a culture? How do they greet in that region? Make it more personalized, and understand certain cultures don't accept the directness. They want more so pleasantries versus not that kind of stuff. And mind it, it's not just chatbot to chatbot negotiations. It's me talking to a person on the phone, and I have an agentic bot which is helping me with the negotiation as well while I'm talking to the guy. So I'm still existent. It's a multi-million dollar deal, and I'm gathering all the bot. I'm giving it a scenario for my negotiation strategy. It's popping out that information, right? Live information for me to be better at my negotiation on the phone call or a live meeting as well. So these are all the scenarios you could look at, right? And at the end of the day, you don't remember a spreadsheet worth of data in your head. So the bot has much more data from your ERP or three other systems and your Excel sheet and your MS Access database. So it could do better any day than you could do in terms of the crunching and analyzing the data as such.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really like that point, Karthik, that you made there, because I think AI, one of the best use cases for AI is to be able to take unstructured data and make sense of it. And an AI can just do that so much better and faster and more efficient than a human can, because if you've got access to somebody's email inbox or Teams chats that's gone on maternity leave, for example, you're not going to be able to crunch and understand that whole days, weeks, months of chats and emails that are in an unstructured format. But AI can do that in seconds. So I certainly think there's that. The other point I would make in terms of where will it get adopted faster or where might its limitations be, I think we also have to look at labor law and contextualize it in that sphere as well. I know you've done a lot of work in the UAE, Karthik, where it's because of their immigration policy, it's quite easy for them to bring in relatively low skilled white collar admin people, and the wages, the salaries are not particularly high. If you compare that with a lot of countries in Western Europe where it's very, very difficult to fire underperforming employees, companies or bosses are scared to go out and hire people, because if they hire the wrong person, it's very, very difficult to get rid of them. So I think the adoption will happen faster in those countries, assuming that trade unions and labor organizations don't try and block it, because it will give companies more flexibility, so as they're not having the risk of hiring the wrong candidates that could potentially then impact them for months and years to come.
Absolutely. And one other factor, Andreas, I just want to, before I forget, I think the make versus buy thing, it's tilting towards make is because there isn't a trust as yet on the use case or the data elements or whatever may be the case. We don't have anyone giving a strong use case of the data. They're not, or it's very blurred for many organizations. So that's the reason they're tilting on that side, or they're on the fence. They're not taking the decision of moving forward is because of this. This is one of the major factors. And there are many folks who also want to do it the traditional way, let it mature, and let me get pushed to do it. So we unfortunately have certain people like that as well. So it's a mix across.
James, I just stopped you at the second point of your list. So if you, of course, otherwise you're killing me if you said, all right, so number 3 was the best one, and we didn't even talk about this. So please feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, we've spoken a little bit around build versus buy, which is something else that I had on there. The two areas that, if we're looking at specific different areas of procurement technology, the two areas that I'm pretty bearish on in terms of, I wouldn't necessarily invest in those areas. Number one is any sort of software that's providing a B2B marketplace kind of function. Because I think supplier discovery tools, especially as AI gets better and better, you won't need a B2B marketplace because you'll be able to get supplier discovery software. And now, I'm actually having a conversation tomorrow with a gentleman from a company that's going to offer that as a pay-as-you-go type of solution. So, you don't even have to sign up to years worth of subscription anymore. If you can do that on a pay-as-you-go basis for supplier scouting, that will pretty much remove the need for any B2B marketplace, except maybe for like simple catalog spend that, it's been around for 20 plus years. And then the other area that I think is running on borrowed time is the lower end of the contract management space. I've been teaching myself quite a lot around no-code tools and what the capabilities and potential is with those. You can build a pretty good contracts repository using a no-code tool, and it doesn't actually take that long. Likewise for something like a vendor onboarding platform or a savings tracker. Will it be as good as the SaaS products that are out there? Probably not. But is it a pretty damn good minimum viable product that will be good enough, and that will avoid you needing to go out and spend a lot more money on a SaaS solution? Yes, in most cases, unless you have a really complex business case. So there are two areas I think specifically that are going to be. I think we're all on the same page that there will be some consolidation in the market. I don't think it will be as much as some of the more bearish commentators out there are talking about, but there will be some, and I think those two areas particularly will be where it will be.
All right, thank you very, very much. Yeah, I think time is moving, and we also have the chance to do some Q&A today, and there was already a lot of comments. Thank you for that in the chat. It would be nice if you can also, if you have questions, put these questions into the chat, basically, and then we can discuss these questions if that's okay for you. So please feel free to also add questions directly you have to the chat, and I will read through them, and we're gonna discuss this. And so what we're gonna do is do just a 30-second break, and everybody of us can drink half a bottle of water now, and then we're back in 30 seconds with the Q&A. See you in a bit. Welcome back after having this little water break. So, of course, first questions are coming in, and please feel free to add more. So, James, Karthik, please help me a bit also reading through the comments. There was one question especially for Karthik, and maybe you can provide. Yes, exactly. Thank you very much. My dear colleague Vasilena is a bit in the background and helping us here a bit. So there was a question, very insightful, on bot providing inputs while negotiation. Can you recommend any such bots we can use?
So there are a couple of them, Dheeraj. I'll I'm trying to remember the one that I spoke to recently. They've been Walmart's been using them for a long, long time. So they're one of the more mature ones. Um, how can I forget the name? I'm just getting old. I just turned 40 in 6 months. So I'll send you the details. I'm sure, James, you might know a couple of names at least, right? In terms of who are these providers that are providing negotiation bots. I spoke to someone in DBW. I forgot.
Negotiation bots, you've got Pactum is one.
Active. Yeah.
Digiproc is another.
Digi.
And on your sourcing platform, my supply can do some of that work too, right? So you've got three there. If I look at the more agentic solutions, you've got Ask Leo, which is more around intake through to free text intake through to converting POs and acknowledging purchase orders. Then you've got Kavita AI, Didero, and the name escapes. I spoke to them yesterday. There's another one in Israel. I'm just going to look them up. That's doing supply chain transparency and but not supply. It's following up on purchase orders, and it's sorting through purchase order. Emerix is their name. So there's three of them that are sorting purchase
in terms
orders
of the bots, right?
Yeah.
I think even Zycus has a bunch of bots as well that they're doing. So you should. There's another. I think there's a webinar that's happening in Feb as well. So I checked their bots, and they got like similar like contract bots. They got sourcing bots. They got onboarding bots. There's different kind of bots who are helping you with each aspect, right? But the autonomous negotiation, I think there are a handful of them like Pactum and a couple of more. Like, and I just saw something yesterday, James. I'll forward that. Maybe I will make a short post on this. And I know my supply has some bit of it as well. So I want you to pick up the answer as well if you can, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So we are doing automated negotiations or autonomous negotiations as well. But I think the question was a bit more on the inputs while negotiating. So I think it was even a bit more not the automation or autonomous negotiation, but most likely on the more strategic part with question, right?
Yeah, got it.
What tool is providing, let's say, help during the negotiations? Let's say also for giving advices during the negotiations. I think this was more the question. I don't know the market too much, honestly, for that one. But we can also, don't know the names now, we can just add them also to the chat later on.
Yeah, Pactum is one. So usually how it works out is,
I think
usually how it works is
negotiations as well, but are not more for strategic ones. I think this is a different one.
On the strategic side,
and planning, there's I mean it's not necessarily an AI bot, but it's a negotiation prep and planning tool. If you check out Ruby by Positive Purchasing, it's a software application, but it's got some AI and machine learning built into it, but it's not a chatbot. Very affordable actually as well. That would be one that will help you plan your negotiation before you go out and execute it. Built on, I mean, they're a training company initially. So that's one example.
All right.
And the other thing I wanted to just touch upon, maybe 30 seconds. So it's basically the current bot on steroids where you'll apply APIs tied to your CPI index, PPI index, any market indicators for the particular category commodity, and then your internal data sources, whether it's your ERP, your contract database, all those data plugged in. And that's how you're making the bot intellect. And it's giving you more strategic insights because you're building the use cases for it to help you during the negotiation. So you're building a few use cases and you're making it more intelligent by chatting with it day in and day out. So that's how it gets built eventually.
Yeah. So there's a bit different ways of how to do that. So on the one hand, there's tools like as you said, just Pactum doing one-on-one negotiation, just saying, all right, normally that's the core of having the chatbot. But it's moving also more in the direction of doing one-to-many negotiation. That at a certain point in time, of course, we will see also end-to-end negotiations happening. That's for sure, and especially also with the help of agents, how I see this. There's a lot of potential here as well. But I think there's the other way where it's pretty much where it's connected to the sourcing. And this is, for example, how we do it. So you have the offers first, and then you're negotiating in parallel with the suppliers on these different offers. That can be also just not only about negotiation bot, it could be very well also being an e-auction or something. So this is basically the focus of most likely using also the competition more and more doing negotiations. But there's different ways of doing it. Others are more project-based, but there is a variety of different options also basically for doing negotiations. I want to come to the next question. So there's a couple of more. So let's see what Vasilena is preparing here first. But yeah, Oscar. All right, Oscar, thank you very much for asking. If agent in the process is the trend, what's your view on over-engineering those workflows and the ease of modifying, improving features on the run? Maybe I can start trying to answer the question if I got it right. I think there can be, of course, a lot of over-engineering happening, but I think you can also start easily with the bot. Let's taking care, first of all, just let me know, connected to the ERP system, just starting, let's say, with one use case, starting with, all right, please let me know what the status of my, basically my current POs is. Yeah, for example, there's easy ways of using chatbots. And this is a bit also how SAP is starting the journey a bit from my perspective. So the dual possibilities in procurement are pretty limited, but you will enrich them step by step. And this is where also providers coming in, also like us, let's say adding different new functionality to these more generic agents, which are the communication layer to the companies. But you can not only do it with SAP, of course, there's a variety of different ways. It's good to have a kind of a starting point and just say, all right, what is the main use case I'm going to solve? And then from there start and let's say adding features basically. And if you're dealing with, from my perspective, more flexible suppliers, they will be pretty much be able to add, let's say, as their agent also to the systems. So this is not, let's say, state of the art today, but I pretty much think we are moving into this. So this is my 5 cents on this. Someone else to add something to that?
So it's the best practice or the best way to go about it. Start small and slowly expand on it, like what Andreas is suggesting. That works pretty decently. You won't burn your hands, but it's better to take a precaution than and one way of taking precaution is kind of having a proper diagnostic assessment of your people, process, data, and technology before you jump into this, to actually know what you want to do and what's the most impactful from a roadmap standpoint. You just don't want to over-engineer, just feel too excited and do one thing after the other and create another mess just on bots, right? So we don't want that. It's better to have a proper BRD design, all the features, what's the most painful stuff, talk to the stakeholders, understand if your data is the problem, your process is the problem. Maybe you got the workflows are stemming from your policy, your procedure already, right? And then whether it's your old tech that you overcomplicate it, now you're adding the bots on top of it to kind of do a botched up job. So you need to ensure it's not that's not the case, right? So I would say that's the safest route to go. But if you have a lot of money in your pocket and you want to do something really quick, you can start off small and slowly grow, expand that, and learn from this, apply that there.
Yeah. There's one final question I want to raise because time is pretty much running. And yeah, thank you very much, Vasilina. So a LinkedIn user, we don't know who he is, but he's asking a very smart question. What are the top use cases or pain points that you see AI solving in procurement? James, I think I think this is not a short answer, isn't it?
Yeah, I can be quite concise, actually, just conscious that we're running out of time. So I'll be as brief as possible. Anything that involves currently a lot of email or a lot of copying and pasting or a lot of administrative work. I'm thinking things like tail spend, free text requisitions, anything that comes to being able to track a purchase order from the time that it's issued to the time that it gets delivered. Going back with simple questions to suppliers when they don't fill out the onboarding documentation correctly. You know, all of this day-to-day administrative work that takes up a category manager's time that really, you know, if you looked at it from an entrepreneurial perspective, an admin assistant should be doing that type of work. So instead of going out and hiring an admin assistant, now you can go out and hire an AI bot that can do that work. And I think if procurement is constantly saying we don't have the resource, I think we're not going to get more headcount. And this is the golden opportunity to enable teams to free themselves up from doing administrative, non-value added work that can't just be automated by robotic process automation. So yeah, lots of opportunity, mainly in the transactional operational procurement space. Writing RFPs is another good one.
Thank you. Karthik, anything you want to add here?
I'll just give a quick 30-second on that one, okay? The basic use cases that are coming up there is, if your answer is a yes to the three of these questions, one is a part of your day-to-day work involves you taking a document from one place and saving some other place, or typing data from one document into your system or into a database, if it's a yes for that. And if there is any work that you're doing which is preconceived rule-based work, right? There's a rule, if it's this, then you do this. If it's this, then you do this. So any of these three cases are the top use cases right now. And this is, we're hardly scratching the surface. So these are the top use cases that we have in the agentic bots as on date. So that's my quick 30-second, I hope, on that.
All right. Thank you very, very much. I think it's a good time right now to wrap it up and basically say thank you to the two of you, having you around, sharing your great knowledge and insights on the tech space in procurement, and especially on your feelings about what's happening also during the next months and in the next year. So thank you very much for being here today. And I wish you, of course, all the best, especially for the coming year, especially also due to the changes that we have been seeing, especially in the United States. So all the very best. And of course, let's keep being in touch and have a wonderful day.
Pleasure. Thanks, Andreas. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.